Thanks, Allison. Thanks for everyone who's attending live and will be watching this on demand. And I hope that this inspires you so much because it's such a critical topic today with our kids and even adults that you will be inspired to share this with others as well, colleagues and friends and parents. We have a broad spectrum of people from all over the world today. This particular webinar is how to apply the family systems trauma model to the special treatment population of kids who are misusing technology, may be addicted to technology, and the implications of this. So I'm going to talk about first, step by step, how you introduce this to the parents or caregivers in a non-threatening way, almost from a overlay of trauma informed on steroids. And then I'm going to show you the shift where you're going to move from education to then trauma responsive application because clients get frustrated when you say, here's the problem. And then you've also got to answer the question, well, now what? What do we do about the problem? So my goal is at the end of today, I'm going to ask you, is this something that's extremely usable? You can use it the next day, whether you're in the role of parents, professional, or both. And the second thing of why this is such an important topic is it's very near and dear to my heart because I've had challenges as a dad with my two 15-year-old twin boys, David and Jonathan, where I've made some really big mistakes in this. So even though I'm the author of the model, I'm going to share with you almost as the case example of from my own kids, and they've said, "Dad, you can share this." So, in other topics, I usually talk about other families, but this one I'm going to be talking about my family and the lessons learned so that you can learn from my mistakes and also my victories. So obviously this one is really near and dear to my heart because I'm the parent of two twin 15-year-old boys who technology is really an issue right now with our family. So the question today is how do we answer this key question? And I hope we get closer to this today, where we make it so that technology is a part of what you do as a teenager or child, but not all you do. I'm going to be a quick, how many of you agree with that by your chat bar? Do you think that's an important question to ask and answer with the parents you work with and parents yourself? Because technology is not a bad thing. It's the misuse of things, technology. Anything that is unbalanced can create dysfunction. And we're going to see that it's oftentimes technology is really misused right now and is moving into the addiction category today with kids. So if you're joining me for the first time, welcome to the Family Systems Trauma Family. I'm Dr. Scott Sells, and my mission is to take I wrote 3 books, and this last book that I wrote, Treating the Traumatized Child, has 12 core techniques in it. And my mission is to show how to use these techniques so that you can move not only working with the child, but the entire family. That is my mission, to master these techniques. And today, as we move into trauma responsive and trauma informed, I'm going to share with you 2 of the 12 techniques where I'm going to highlight how do we talk to parents about safety first when there is a misuse of technology, where teenagers move to it's one thing I do, but they move to all I do, because a disturbing statistic is that the average amount of time kids or teenagers are using technology is 7 hours a day. I don't think that shocks many of you, but that is a misuse of technology. And then I want to show you trauma playbooks from my own kids that I've used that have helped turn the tide to rebalance something that has become very unbalanced. At least it was in our family, and we still battle it today. For those of you who really want to continue to follow me Every month I do a new webinar. Next month is going to be on the extreme disrespect, kind of around explosive kids, explosive parents. So if you love today, please sign up for the free one next month on disrespect. Kind of goes hand in hand sometimes with the misuse of technology, by the way. So um, I believe I'm going to ask a poll in the audience of how many people agree with this. How many of you agree that right now technology and boundaries around it has moved to the number one reason for the catalyst for parent and child conflict today, especially in teenagers, and has created damage to the relationship? So, how many of you agree with me that this has moved from this third reason, fourth reason, that it's really as kids have gone up to 7 hours a day? We've got Lee, Shia, yes. Terry, yes. Thumbs up. Certainly agree. Yeah. As a parent, I've also often told my son Jonathan, if we didn't have technology, we would have such a much better relationship. Do you realize that our number one arguments are around boundaries around technology? And you continue to have the position that I can handle it. Just like with any drug, people always say I can handle it, but the maturity level is not there where they can handle it, even though they think they can. So if this is the number one reason, this is kind of an important webinar, okay? If this is true, and I believe it is. Um, so here's the tools you're going to walk away with. There's three today. The first is knowledge is empowering, and this is where you're going to give your parents this slide deck, or you're going to create your own slide deck, or you're going to use this slide deck as a handout for your parents. And you're going to talk about how technology is issued in 4 lies. And when a child or family is functioning around a lie, nothing good comes from that. That's why they say the truth shall set you free. But these lies have become truths for kids and parents, and it's not good. So the second tool is how to recognize if you're dealing with an iFamily. iFamily is someone that is a collective whole. More than one member of the family is truly misusing technology. And it's also contributed to something called nature deficit disorder, where you're not seeing the kids going outside. There's no sense of solitude. There's no sense of silence. And the human mind has to be able to turn itself off. And kids today, with 7+ hours of technology, and that goes for the adults too, are not turning their mind off. And that is bringing about a false positive of anxiety that's going through the roof. I can't tell you how many times parents come to me and say, would you please put my son or daughter on medication for their anxiety? And I first say, well, can we start with reining in the technology to 2 to 3 hours a day, even though your child will go through withdrawal symptoms and get worse before they get better, and start there and see how much anxiety is left over. And more times than not, it takes about 30 days to rebalance the brain. If they go 30 days, more often than not, there's a huge downtick in anxiety. So this is one of the red herrings or red flags around technology. So you have to help recognize, like you do a DSM-4 diagnosis or DSM-5 diagnosis, do you have clinical depression? If you don't have depression, we're not going to do a solution for it. But do you have technology in the area of the red zone? So you got to recognize it for yourself as a clinician or helper or as a parent, and also recognize, is there also nature deficit disorder? I'll explain that in just a moment. You're also going to get a first look today. I've been asked by the publisher Random House to take my book that I wrote back in 2000 when we still had flip phones, and now it's 2024. And the new edition is coming out around this time next year. And one of the central upgrades of this book is going to be around technology and giving parents concrete tools. So, this book has sold over 100,000 copies. It was written for parents. If you read it today versus the book that's coming out uh, next year, it'll be like night and day because so much has changed in 24 years since the book was first published. So I'm going to give you a first look because I'm writing it right now into this area of technology as one of the key sections of this book that wasn't really there back in 2000, and it's coming out next fall. Um, the third tool, which is tied into the new book, well, the new edition, is that when I was faced with this with my wife, we had to work smarter, not harder. This is the first generation where kids that are born out of the womb are in technology. This first generation. Before that, it was like the switch over from the flip phone to the smartphone. But the first thing you have to do is your kids are oftentimes 3 steps ahead of you in technology. So I had to go to an expert. Like, I don't know how to do plumbing, but I know that I have a problem with my pipes. So I sought out locally an expert who could get me on a level playing field with my kids. How am I going to set clear boundaries with a pre-written contract if I can't monitor? So it began with a local tech help. And I'm going to share with you the revelations I got to pass on to you. But now I give parents, like if I have, so funny, like sometimes when people have eating problems, or poor diet, I say, let's go to a nutritionist. Um, Oftentimes I use an analogy of let's start with let's find a local tech person so that we can set clear boundaries so you don't have to get into power struggles with your kids so much. And parents are looking at me like, really? I'm like, yeah, sometimes when you have a problem, you know what your limitations are, and you have to seek outside help very strategically and tactically. And so for the first couple years, I was trying to figure out technology myself, and I was like a deer in headlights. And my kids were 4 steps ahead of me, and this is other clients I work with. So I'm going to show you how I pivoted and how I teach parents now. Start with the technology expert, and here's some benchmarks to get, then move to a clear written plan with boundaries, and also be prepared that your kid's going to get worse before they get better. And that's normal and natural. So for the first 30 days. So I'm going to move from tool 1, which is the 4 lies, tool 2, which is how do you recognize if there's a problem in the family? And tool number 3, we're going to pivot to trauma responsive. When the family member says, I get it, we have a problem here, now what? So I hope you enjoy this very concrete, um, you know, webinar. All right, here we go. And this was I want to do a plug for Frankie on Call because they really helped our family a lot. Okay, let's go to the first one. Knowledge is empowering. So I'll share with parents, oftentimes without the kid in the room. Sometimes the kids really want to know about this. So sometimes I kick the tires with the adults to see how open they are to this new knowledge. And then I'll kind of expand my lens to include the kids as well, because I want them included in this in a collaborative fashion. But I often start with the adults first. And I'll say there are 4 lies that technology has created. It's created this sense of I am the center of the universe for the child. I must always have choice. I'm my own authority. I don't need to check my teacher's authority. I don't need your authority. I'm my own authority. And I don't need parents or teachers. And these 4 lies have created an unbalance in the family and in the child. Let's go over them one at a time because you have to recognize them first before you can solve the problem. Lie number 1, I am the center of my universe and I must have instant gratification. So this has led to the rise of entitlement. How many of you have seen in this generation, just in the last 5, 10 years, even, that there's been a rise of kids feeling I'm entitled to things, I don't have to work for things, you just owe this to me. I also have a lack of self-control. I want instant gratification. And there's another book that's been written called The Dopamine Effect, which says that as a society, we're getting instant gratification from our phone, which is now a supercomputer, and it's really unbalanced the whole family in a huge way. So when I get my needs met instantly, and I see this as an adult too, if I want an answer, I want to check if I want to do sports betting, if I want to get pain medication, I can get anything and everything I want in an instant. I don't have to develop a muscle called self-control. I'm not born with self-control. It's a muscle that must be worked on. And some of the research is showing that the best predictor of our kids' success in adulthood is not IQ, not self-esteem, not how many friends they have, but self-control, patience, delayed gratification. And so technology for a lot of our kids is not allowing for our kids to have self-control. And it breeds entitlement. This is like rocket fuel on a problem that is already there. Lie number two, I have to have choice. Do you remember when you were a kid where your grandparents would say, we're having uh, chip beef on toast tonight? I don't think no, they have that. We're having spam tonight. That's it. Or you're sitting over there next to your father. Now everything's a drop down menu. Everything's a choice. It's like, do you want to sit here or do you want to sit here? Do you want a buffet menu of different options? And so with technology, it instantly now from the womb, when kids get young, is 3, 4, 5 years old, is there's a message with technology that everything is a choice. Well, we know in the real world, kids don't always know what's in their best interests. And it's contributed to this epidemic of what I call gentle parenting, moving away from something called more authoritative parenting. And there's a great book out that's a little bit controversial called Bad Therapy. Some of you have read it. And it's created, technology is not the only thing, but it's created this sense of like everything is a choice. Well, if I'm a 10-year-old, I don't have the maturity level always to make choices, but I'm programmed from the time I'm little that with technology, everything's a drop down menu. This is causing an unbalance in the family of epic proportions. So that's the next lie. And it's also contributed to a change in parenting styles as well. Let's go to the next one. Kids today don't understand that what they have is a privilege, not a right. So sometimes when I work with parents and say, one of the natural logical consequences is of disrespect is you don't get the that this is not your right, this is a privilege. And kids are like, no, it's my right. You can't take my iPhone away from me. And parents buy into that narrative. And so we have to help them understand that no, things are earned, privileges that versus rights. And if we don't teach kids that really early on, we have the buddingness of a entitled kid. So lie number three, I'm my own authority. And as I go through this, I hope that you're going to put some comments in on what the reaction, because Allison's going to be collecting these, because we're going to have, I hope we have a really rich discussion at the end. So questions or comments in real time, please put those in, because I hope that we can really discuss some of this stuff. I am my own authority. Again, if I need an answer, I go to my phone. And I can't tell you how many discussions I've had with my son David, where he's like, Oh, I know how the Civil War started. And when you talk to him, he got the information off of TikTok and he's totally misinformed, but he doesn't think so. So he doesn't have to go to teachers. He doesn't have to go to his parents. He's like, I just accept whatever Siri tells me, whatever TikTok tells me. This is a problem because then I'm my own authority. I don't need adults. I don't need anyone. I've got my phone. Again, any extreme breeds about dysfunction. So we're drowning in information while we're starving for wisdom. So my son David has tons of information, but he doesn't have wisdom. And this applies to a lot of kids and even adults. We see this in the political arena. I could go on and on and on. So here's the 4 lies that I go over with parents and kids. And I say, do you have one or all of these? And most of the families I work with say, we have all of them. And the parents say, I do it too. I have as many problems. It's a nice place to start because until you have a problem, there's no need for a solution. So if a kid is depressed, suicidal, or anxious, technology can accelerate these symptoms because you're going to see with the iFamily, if I have technology and I'm my own authority, I don't need to connect with my family. And you see this at an extreme level when you go to restaurants and people are talking through text or they're texting each other at meals in restaurants and there's no connection. They're just constantly on their phone. And I don't need anyone. I have entitlement. I'm center of the universe. So, technology addiction is when technology becomes addictive in the same way as drugs or alcohol. It gets in the way of healthy activities. It starts to make life unmanageable. It gets in the way of like going outside and, having fun with your friends. You're not leaving your room. You can't look away from your phone. Um, and when you start to move into this, it's an over dependence from an emotional standpoint. I'm going to tell you a story about how my son is dealing with depression and technology. If I let him, he would watch Xbox and Netflix all day long because he feels he needs this cocoon right now. But I know better as a parent with my wife, but it's creating an over dependence where it's giving him a false sense of okayness. And when you withdraw the technology, even for a day or 2 days, if your child gets more angry, more depressed and irritable, just if you remove a drug and I'm addicted to that, there's parallel signs between an addiction with technology and addiction with a drug. So these are things you got to watch out for. I call it TA. This is groundbreaking stuff. I'm going to give a shout out to Jonathan Haidt. The book came out this year. And what Jonathan found, which I think is really a must read for parents and professionals, is that he found out through careful culmination of research that between 2010 and 2015, the social lives of our children moved from a play based childhood to a phone based childhood. This is really a seismic shift between these 5 years. That um, a phone based childhood is you have continuous access to social media and online gaming instead of a play based childhood. Let me define this from Jonathan. Jonathan said that this was the single greatest rewiring of our team's brain, is the single greatest reason for the current tidal wave of adolescent mental illness. Play-based childhood means you're free to play with other kids and develop social skills, be outside in nature, and learn conflict resolution. A, a phone-based childhood is you move your social life and free time onto internet controlled devices. Let me give you a couple of examples of this that Jonathan gave and also from my own experience. He said that it's not so much that teenagers or young adults are worried about climate change. The unbalance is that when they're constantly talking about climate change on the internet. So it's not like, okay, climate change is bad. I'll put it in the category of it's something to worry about, but I'm going to move on to no, climate change is an issue and I'm going to talk about it, constantly with my friends. So all of a sudden, climate change takes a life on its own. And as Patricia said, the pandemic didn't help, it just accelerated this. Um, so and teachers are saying our kids are coming in college as freshmen and they're like, yeah, I have so many likes and friends on Facebook and Instagram. I'm good, but they have no social skills because they haven't actually had physical contact with people. They've not had social mistakes that they've overcome because it's all insulate, it's a false positive. So those are two examples that when you have a phone-based childhood, there's a problem. How many of you noticed back around 2005, 2006, 2007, 2010 that the neighborhoods are dead quiet? There's nobody playing outside anymore. And when we grew up, you know, um, uh, there was kids out in nature. Um, and so this is where we've got some real problems we've got to address. I know a lot of times my colleagues say, well, it's not an issue I really want to deal with directly. I want to deal with the symptoms of anxiety or depression. But we've got to move from the weeds to the root. So let's go there right now. So, first of all, is there a problem? If there's not a problem, then don't worry about it. But if it also is rocket fuel for the four lies, let's worry about it. Let's be concerned about it. So he said, using extensive research, Jonathan Haidt showed that no other theory has been able to explain why the rates of anxiety, depression, or suicide have skyrocketed in adolescents all over the world in the same way. So he looked at that when we went from a flip phone to a smartphone, extensive research showed that all over the world, this is when things went haywire. So the screen time has slowly increased since COVID. It's now up to a staggering average of 7 hours per day, and it's rising. And for many, the smartphone has become like an addictive drug. So let's look at this here. This blocks family interactions with family. Kids aren't reading books. They're not out with friends. They're more like likes, okay? Not interaction. They're not having an interaction with nature. They're not having healthy physical touch, and they're not having healthy um, communication. So these are like beta blockers that are creating this severe blockage between the interaction. You can see by this picture, instead of this family talking over a meal, reading books together, discussing what they're reading, they're outside in nature, they're all disconnected from each other, even though they're in the same room together. So let's recognize if you have an iFamily. Here's what is an iFamily? Well, are you texting instead of talking? That's number one sign. Are you constantly checking your iPhone or social accounts? If a family member is depressed or stressed, do they go right to technology instead of talking? Are there pictures on the wall and board games replaced by TV or technology? Is there a TV in every room? Board games just not even used anymore? Are there pictures or technology everywhere? And is one or more family members feeling withdrawal symptoms if they are away from technology from anywhere longer than a day? So I'll ask parents, do you have all five of these, one of these, two of these? And what I get a lot of times is parents are like, I never thought of it this way before. And there's no shame or blame. I always ask the parents, we can't change the past, but what are we going to do in the future from this point forward? So I thought it was ironic that Steve Jobs is quoted before he died that we don't even have the iPhone or iPad in our home because we think it's too dangerous for our kids. I just thought there was irony in that quote by Steve Jobs. So, uh, so how many of you work with iFamilies right now under those definitions? Let's kind of see how many yes do we have. Uh, Julie says yes. Michaela says absolutely no. Okay. We got yes. Okay. So that's good to know. So that's kind of like my DSM diagnosis in a way, tongue in cheek, of course. So let's go to number 3. Um, nature deficit disorder is part of tool number 2. I love this book by Richard Love, The Last Child in the Woods. And I love this picture of the kids in the woods, but with their technology. Like how many people go camping now because internet, I mean, you can get cell phone coverage everywhere where they're actually camping with their iPhones. So nature deficit disorder contributes to it, according to Richard in his book, it diminishes our senses, our, 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 our sight, sense of touch or sense of hearing. We're not using those muscles, so they diminish. We have attention difficulties. It leads to a higher rate of ADD. We have higher rates of obesity, and we have higher rates of emotional or physical illness. Believe it or not, one of the interventions I'm going to share with you is when you ask your child, let's go camping, let's go for a walk, they're immediately going to say no. And too many parents I work with say, well, they said no, so I don't want to push it on them. But I go back to if you have diminished senses in this ability and you don't know that it's good for you, of course you're going to say no. So one of the things I'll be showing you is even with my own kids, I said we're going to experiment because kids don't always know what's in their best interest. So an anti-venom is to artificially induce nature. And it's not going to be like they're not going to wake up one day by osmosis and say, gee whiz, I've been on my cell phone for 8 hours. I need to take a break and listen to the birds sing. I need to go see a waterfall. It's not going to happen because they're rewired in their brain to be a phone-based childhood, not a nature or play-based childhood. So you have to educate families about this. So let's go to the third and final step, and then we'll take time for questions and comments. And I think this is a really important topic that we take some extra time with some dialogue. So I'm faced with, we're definitely an iFamily, even though I'm the author of the model. Definitely have seen the lies penetrate our kids. So what do I do with this? Well, it's creating more anxiety in our kids, more depression, and our kids are medicating a lot of the mental health issues that they're going through. So I start with a local tech and I call frankieoncall.com. And so I know that before I'm not an expert in this area, but I better become an expert. So even though my kids are 3 steps ahead of me, I better catch up, even at least if they're only 1 step ahead of me before I set boundaries. I better know what I'm doing. So I can set boundaries around chores because I know about that. I can set boundaries around disrespect, but I'm outside my element with technology. I don't know enough about it, and kids know this. So the first thing is I have to monitor access without power struggles. I have to move to trust but verify. Because my kids would say, we're only on the iPhone for 3 hours, Dad, but I have no way to verify that. Okay. That's an example. So I call my local tech person. I have now a cocktail of bark, IP restrictions, external restrictions, and what I call um, activities that are outside. So I'm not going to just say we're going to limit technology without replacing it with something better. So, and I also now do regularly quarterly and monthly check-ins with my tech, almost like a doctor checking cholesterol, because it wasn't one and done. During the struggle with my children and struggles with other families, the kids were so quick to be able to undo what I thought was permanent, that if I didn't go and do a monthly checkup with my tech doctor, so to speak, I was kids were I couldn't believe how they undid so many things. So this was the guy I saw, and the first step was bark. And of course, my kids are like they go ballistic. Like I'm an adult, not a child, and I have to know going in that they're going to have this reaction because they are really kind of embedded too much in technology. And I'm not going to go with, oh, you don't like this, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to take a more authoritarian style parenting where I'm going to say, this is a boundary that's non negotiable. Later on, we can negotiate, but there has to be proof and verifiable proof through Bark that you're not on there. And you can see already that David messed with his phone, and Bark told me that I had to fix the screen time because David went in there, found my password, and adjusted it. But Bark let me know that David was in there. Okay. So if I didn't have that monitor, I would have never known. So the next thing I did is the tech person said, do you know within the iPhone or the Android, there is some really good internal things around downtime, app limits, communication limits. And I'm like, I didn't know all that. And I could change the internal function of the iPhone. As simple as you might think that is, I didn't know any of that. And also with the Xbox, Microsoft makes, so now I can totally control technology from my own phone. I have my own password that they don't know. With Bark, with the screen time, I can set it. It goes off at a certain time. There's no arguing, no fighting. I'm now taking the control out of the kids and put it where it should be right now with me as the pack leader or the adult with my wife. So this was a seismic shift in an operating system that went from, how's the technology going, kids? Oh, everything's fine, Dad, to now I have measurable impact to know if I'm trusting but verifying. So the second step is I knew that it was going to get worse before it got better, especially with Jonathan. Jonathan went berserk when these limits were put down. He just says, I'm going to hate you till I die. I can't believe you're doing this. None of my friends have this. None of my friends do this. Why are you doing this to me? And I had to not take it personal. I had to prepare for what's called parent abuse or teen terrorism. This is a central concept in my book, Parenting Your Out of Control Teenager, and I'll explain to all of you what that means. And I'm going to be talking about that next month when I talk about FST, working with extreme disrespect or extreme opposition defiant disorder. You're going to find this to prepare for it. And this is where parents get cold feet and they give up before they see the benefit of their technology realignment. Third thing is I had to write it in advance and it had to be loophole free. So many parents say it's verbal. I fly by the seat of my pants. With technology, it has to be predetermined. It has to be written out because kids will run circles around you with technology. And I don't know how many times my kids would be like, well, that wasn't in the contract. And I said, what did we put in the contract? So I had to go up at their bathroom mirror and look at it, and you'll see the contract I wrote with my wife. But without something pre-written, I was dead. So I had to have the monitoring, I had to prepare that it was going to get worse before it got better, and I had to prepare what's called parent abuse or teen terrorism, which I'll explain in just a moment. So I had to keep it simple. With my wife and I together, with consultation with my tech person, who almost became my consultant, I said, if you delete or alter your search history, you're going to lose your phone for the first time 7 days. And the second time, you're going to go to 14 days in a flip phone. I figured out with the tech's help that I could purchase from Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T a simple flip phone. And so what I would do is I could take out the SIM card of the phone and move it immediately to the flip phone. So I didn't have to have any fees or charges. I learned how to do everything on the Verizon website, so I could do it with the touch of a click. And so I don't know which was worse for the kids, having to lose their phone or go to a flip phone. The flip phone actually was like I still was able to keep in communication with them. They were still able to text me, but it was a bare bones flip phone. And that became a real change because the kids were on Safari looking at pornography and they got really good at deleting their history. And again, if I hadn't talked to a local tech person, I wouldn't have known that. So this clear boundary was up front. The three no's on the iPhone: no pornography, no movies because they were watching Netflix and Hulu. And Jonathan found a third-party website where you could go and get movies. You could get pornography, you could get X-rated movies, R-rated movies. So he found a back door to getting any movie you want. And so if I wasn't able to lock the Safari down, he could go through the back door to get the front door, and no drug buying or drug viewing. Obviously, my kids were also struggling with marijuana use. And so they were able to use their iPhone to get on message boards. So this is really where it had to be shut down. So again, the second time was a month. The Xbox you can't use until homework is done first. You can't alter the setting without pre-approval. First day, 7 days, second time, 14 days. And the time limits are that the phone and Xbox shuts off at 10 p.m. And also there's 2 hours, 1 hour on the Xbox and 2 hours on the phone. So all of a sudden I didn't have to worry about monitoring how much use they have. It would automatically shut off except for phone and text at the time that it was supposed to. And guess what? My kids got a good night's sleep. They were starting to read books, and it was because I was 3 steps ahead of them. But when you do this, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's the first law of thermodynamics. You have to be prepared that if your kid is addicted to the phone, that they will go into DTs or shakes or sweats, just like if somebody was drinking for a long time. This means that a kid will use extreme behaviors like disrespect, threats to run away, aggression. I call them the 7 aces because it's like a poker player who has an ace up their sleeve, and you think you're going to win the poker tournament, but the person has a hidden ace up their sleeve, and they totally change the poker tournament and they win. Kids have 7 aces, and if they will scare the parents into giving up their authority and returning the hierarchy back to status quo. So here's what Jonathan did. As soon as I got all of my ducks in a row with my wife, all hell broke loose. And here's the 7 aces. A kid could go into amping up the extreme disrespect. For younger kids, it could be amplifying the temper tantrums. The first ace Jonathan threw down is he said, if you limit my technology, I'm going to run away. And just for good measure, Jonathan did leave the house for an hour just to see if I would call the police with my wife. I would panic. he was kicking the tires to say, is this going to work? But knowledge is power. And I knew that this was a manipulative, creative ploy on Jonathan, like a chessboard rook to knight, that was going to be what he's going to do, because he wants me to say, okay, Jonathan, let's go back to the way it was with technology. I trust you. And there was no threats or acts of aggression, but you'll see that in a lot of kids with technology. If you try to take the phone away, they get aggressive right away. No threats or acts of suicide, but Jonathan said, I need technology, Dad. If I don't have technology, then I'm going to go to a chemical okayness with drugs or alcohol. I need one or the other as a drug because I'm feeling depressed. And to some extent, that was true. But what was happening is that the longer Jonathan was in his room with technology, the more he didn't have to come out of his room, the more anxious he got, and it started to develop a generalized anxiety disorder. So it started to take a life of its own, and we stuck by this. And so if we had not gone through these ACEs, Jonathan will tell you if he was here, he would have just continued the technology unabated. So, and you can see a picture, because the other thing that happened, this is ketamine, by the way. The other thing that happened is that the tech person was able to tell me that kids today can have a hidden folders file on their phone, and they can swipe on the settings so you don't see in their photos what's really going on. And so the kids didn't know that we knew that there was a hidden folder. So every time we look at their phones, we would switch to unhide the folder. And the kids were like, wow, we want to document everything we do bad on the phone. And so many parents today and counselors are like, yeah, when we look at the phone, we see it's totally clean. The kids must be telling us everything is good to go. Not so fast. There is plenty of ways now, like Snapchat, the the uh, the the text between kids just disappears. It's one of the most dangerous things you can have. So we were lucky enough to find things before they got totally out of hand, because we were 2 steps ahead of our kids. So here's the last part I want to say, and then we were going to take time for questions and comments. Is you cannot just have correction without connection. So many parents are like, wow, I got to put some boundaries on this technology. But if you don't buttress this up with repairing the attachment or nurturance, connection before correction, or in Jonathan and David's case, it was correction with connection. It has to be a balance between love and limits. So let me show you, which I think was just as important as the boundaries, that I started to say to the boys. Our relationship has been bruised over constant arguing and fighting over technology for 2 solid years. It's also sucked out of the room attachment and nurturance, because I've been so busy with Nancy putting out fires that we have lost connection. So here's what I did, and here's what I recommend to other parents. I said to the boys, and I've recommended other parents, this is all going to be in the new edition of the book, that I first said, what signs does Jonathan and David have? And they've got these 3. So I know that there is a problem to solve. The next thing I did is I use in FST, we use something called trauma playbooks or prescriptions, just like you would get at a doctor. If you had strep throat, they would give you amoxicillin. And parents love this metaphor. And so we said this is for other parents and my own, is one special outing with your child. This took place in actually beautiful Livingston, Bozeman, Montana. And you're not going to take any technology with you. You're going to bring an object from the hike to kind of talk about it. at the dinner table. You can modify this however you want. But when the kid said to me, no way am I going to go on a stupid hike. I hate hikes. I negotiate with them and say, it's you have a choice. It's almost like parenting with love and logic. You can either have your phone or I'll turn it off because I can turn it off from my phone now, or we go on a hike. It's your choice. Either way, it doesn't matter. Which one do you choose? So they said, when you put it that way, we're going to go on a hike. And something magical happened. The kids had a wonderful time. We, it was almost like they were rebooting their brain. And we did that once a week for 30 days. And we even moved into camping. This was the game changer. But what was so incredible about children is they're so resilient that if you start rewiring their brain, it starts to like catch fire in a good way. So all I can say is that, and this is me and David just 2 weeks ago when we went on a road trip to Colorado. Um, he's still struggling, my beautiful boy David. But he said to the counselor the other day, this road trip, this is in front of Sinclair gas station, Dad and I are closer than ever. And right now, he doesn't have technology for 6 months because it was 1 month for every month that we found out he was using drugs. And so right now we have a 6 month window of no technology, and David is becoming a different kid. So uh I'm tearing up a little bit thinking about it, but thanks for the emojis like thumbs up. And I hope that from these tools that you can replicate some of this with your families, that if we can even save one life or help one kid, you being on this webinar was worth it. And I hope that you'll like go viral with it. Like, hey guys, this is a good webinar. You should watch it, because I think we got to take ground back with our families. And we just can't say, oh, there's a technology problem. So if you want to go deeper in this and get your confidence to skyrocket, you want to acquire step-by-step tools, you want to really learn this stuff. Twice a year, I do an online course, 12 weeks, 12 to 14 weeks. And I want to invite some of you who are out there saying, I can't go back to graduate school. I'm in. I want to become great at family work. We need more family work. We need more family systems work. I hope that you'll just, go to the website, familytrauma.com, scroll to the bottom, or take a picture of this when you get it. You're going to get this slide deck right after. But think about the online course maybe now or in the future, but also come to some of these webinars. As you can see on August 5th, coming in August, we're going to do this one. And if you want to look at the course, you can just click on the landing page and go to this 3-minute video. So you can really see a behind the scenes look of the course and see, is this for me? Is this something that will really help me really learn and with confidence this kind of work? If you want more information or you're part of an agency who's interested in this kind of work, please feel free to email us at info@familytrauma.com. So now this is my favorite part of the webinar is I wanted to ask Allison if there were some cool comments, some cool thoughts about this, because I saw some really coming on and I want to take some time to answer some of those if I could.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Sells. So to start, I'm just going to let everyone know that we are going to be sharing the PowerPoint slides and the recording. You will get links to both of those sent to you tomorrow. Okay, so we have that. Our first question is when you are working with a family as a clinician and the family has fallen into the routine of giving the child a tablet or giving them or letting their child sort of lead the home. Where do you begin, Dr. Sell?
Well, you begin where you really have a careful discussion with them to see if there's unbalances and where those unbalances are. Like you look at how much time the child is spending. You know, age doesn't matter. You look at the American Pediatric Academy of some of the guidelines for how much time a child should spend on this. You start there, and if the time is way out of whack, you say to the parents, you know, with talking to a local technician or technology, do you want to go ahead and, you know, experiment with lowering the number of hours? You also have discussions about, tell me what happens when you withdraw technology for a longer period of time. Do they get more anxious? Do they start to get more depressed? Um, which one of these four lies do you think are embedded within in their child's cognitive thinking? And then you methodically go through. I know this is scary for you because this is the number one reason for conflict, and you yourself are struggling with technology. But do you think it's time for us to move your child more to a play-based childhood or a phone-based childhood? So knowledge is empowering where you are not judgmental at all, but you check the box on these things. And sometimes I'll even write on a whiteboard, here's the number one red flags to look for, and how many of these do you have? And then the family is more receptive to say, now what? And we take it in bite-sized pieces, because if you just totally shut the faucet off, you and don't replace it with something better, that has to be in the discussion. So if I shut the faucet off with my boys and said, I'm just going to take technology away altogether, I'm going to limit it to 2 hours, but I didn't come alongside with the connection and the relationship, that would have been parenting with limits without love. So it's really, parents are more open to this discussion, but it's got to be very methodical and systematic and non blaming. That's my recommendation. Next question or comment.
Okay, so we do have a question about actually someone's asking for advice on how to help school systems where technology help school systems understand that technology isn't the only way for students to be learning. This person has struggled with technology at home, but most of the issue also continued at school.
Yeah, Jonathan, in the last part of his book, that's why I like the book so much, and that's why I recommend it, gives some actual solutions. And one of them is, how do you approach your local school? Uh, he makes a point that schools need to be aware of this rewiring, and you just have to present the research in a parent teacher conference in a non-threatening way, because a lot of people really don't have this knowledge. And just say, you know, one of the things that is a boundary is that kids are allowed to take their cell phones or smartphones into the classroom, and there's no boundaries around that, and it's totally created a intolerable situation for the teacher, because the kids are on their phones while they're trying to learn a lesson. So for a lot of schools, they have to just come to this agreement and be open with the parents and say, look, can we try this as an experiment where the kids either put their cell phones in a basket if it's a smaller school, or it's shut off? I know schools are going to that, but it's not without, you know, difficulty. So, you know, we really have to look at boundaries not only in the home, but outside the home. And it starts with good education, like I presented today, in a non threatening, non shaming way. There's no easy way to do this, because if I said to you, hey, there's crack cocaine for the brain, and you just need to stop doing it, it'll be fine. That's not as easy as it sounds. You're going to have to go through a period of withdrawal symptoms but I can tell you it's worth it. But you have to tell the parents it's going to get worse before it gets better. And you want technology to be the thing, but you don't want technology to be the only thing. And that's the key. Next question.
Okay, we have time for one last question, Dr. Sells. And so the question is about sort of reactions. So one therapist is saying that one of the youth that she's working with will become extremely escalated when mom puts limit on technology, which also includes self-harm and physical and verbal aggression towards family and school.
Yeah, I mean, one of the case studies in the Dopamine Nation, which is another good book, uh, the psychiatrist has some really good discussions with the adolescents and one on one. And the case study in the book is around using marijuana, but it could just be technology where the adolescent goes in and says, there's no way I'm going to stop using it. Gives me, it solves too many problems for me. Um, and the psychiatrist did a beautiful job of just saying, what are the negative downsides of this? And did it in a very one down position and said, would you be willing to try 30 days? And then you can still, after 30 days, go back to marijuana because you're getting to an age where the parents are going to have to just totally like be like a helicopter parent. So a lot of times therapists don't do enough due diligence where they're working both sides of the fence, divide and conquer, I call it, where I'll work with the parents separately. I'll see how much room there is to bring the kid in and see how workable they are. And then some kids are like, no way, get me the hell out of here. And then I move with the kid individually and try to get them to try an experiment of 30 days where they'll feel so much better. And many, many kids, surprisingly, will say, the way you're approaching me, where it's an offer, I'm willing to try something for 30 days. Because as the researcher shows in that book, Dopamine Effect, the brain is so amazing that it can rewire itself in 30 days. So I often try both and family and divide and conquer. I don't give up easy, but my go to oftentimes is what do you have to lose by doing a simple experiment with a clear written plan? And then I do a lot of dress rehearsals because what's going to happen is if you give a family a plan, they need to get their voice tone under control, their timing better, not get their buttons pushed. So you can't just give these families a plan without saying, could I be, push your buttons before your kid walks in the room and come up with every curveball they can throw. So that I'm going to be actually talking about some of that more next month when I do, the parenting out of control teenager with aggression. But I'll say that I'll just put a pin in that now that it has to be a package. So. All right. I don't know the author off the top of my head of Dopamine Effect, but I guarantee if you put that in Amazon, it'll come up like that. Dopamine Effect. It's a fascinating book. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed it. Thanks you for some of your comments like Scott, hang in there with your kids. It's gonna be okay. It just really, really, really hit my heart. So thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you next month. And I hope to see some of you in the upcoming course in September. So until then, take care, everybody. Have a great week. Bye now.